So from the time you started to the time that you sold, how long was that period?
14 years.
Okay. So at what point within the 14 years did you start thinking like, maybe I should sell this? Or how did that sale process first get started?
Well, the desire was from day one, especially when my partner joined. When you take on a partner, it's important to have that conversation. What's our end game here? And we both agreed, we want to build this and sell it. Now, that doesn't mean that at many points throughout our journey, we thought, maybe this is just a lifestyle business. I mean, at some point, it did start to generate a lot of cash. It was very profitable after a number of years. And we thought, well, we'd love to sell it, but if we don't, we're finally at least paying ourselves well and funding our retirement, which we did do for a long time, and getting a lot of value out of it. But we saw a big opportunity in 2021, because what happened in 2020 is a lot of funding and deals didn't go anywhere because of COVID. And then in 2021, a lot of, private equity firms were starting to look down market at smaller companies.
Yes.
And, this was a confusing thing, because over the years we talked to PE firms and we talked to some mergers and acquisitions people, and the goalposts kept moving. At first it was like, well, when you get to 5 million ARR, that's the sweet spot. And then all of a sudden, right before COVID, it seemed to move to 10 million. And then after COVID, it was down to 5. I mean, it all depends on the changing market conditions. And so after not after, but during the COVID-y time, 21, we were being contacted weekly by multiple private equity firms, and started having some conversations with a few select firms. And how that works is, at some point, they want to see your financials and your customer information. And so you sign NDAs, and they take a look at these enormous spreadsheets and kind of do some numbers crunching about the quality of your revenue and your churn and all these important metrics. And then they'll say, well, we'd like to see where you are in another 6 months. So then they go away, and then they come back and they look at the same thing. So we were having a lot of these types of interactions. And at the same time, multiples were huge. The market was very, very frothy. So SaaS business, all of a sudden we were seeing multiples from like 7 to 12. And we knew we wouldn't be on that highest end, because we are not sexy enough in terms of, we use people to do our work.
Right. You're not pure tech.
Yeah. So we thought, well, if we could get 7, that would be amazing. Right. So we started to worry about timing, because we knew, the majority of our customers were in tech, and tech had been going gangbusters for quite a few years. And, if you've lived as long as I have, that's not going to last forever.
Right. That's right.
So we started worrying, like, when's the crash coming? Because that's going to be really hard to manage through, given our concentration in tech. And so 2021, I was back in South Carolina, where my partner and the rest of our employees worked. And we got a call from one of these PE firms, and they said, well, how's it going? And I said, it's good, but, things are going really well. We just hired a VP of operations. We formed a leadership team, and we're just going to keep our heads down for the moment, because we have an amazing pipeline and we want to see where it takes us. And he said, well, that's too bad, because I could give you a term sheet for 48 million today. And I was like, what? So I hung up the phone, and I looked at my partner, and I said, I think we need to seriously
accelerate this plan. Yes.
And because we had just, every time I was there, we would talk about our worries about timing. And so then I called the guy, Michael, who had given me that 125,000, and he had since gone on to found more companies and sell more companies. And now he's a public company CEO. And I told him, about the phone call. And he said, Sharon, they're full of shit. They are so full of shit. He's like, if you weren't thinking of selling before this phone call, I don't know why. He said, because they're going to lure you in with this.
Exactly.
They're going to chip away. And then you're going to be down to 20 million, and you'll just take it because you're exhausted.
Yep.
So he said, and he said, why, what changed your mind besides the number? And I talked to him about my worries about timing and the economy. And he said, look, if you want to sell, you need to hire a banker and run a process. And so I hung up the phone and I ran into my partner's office and I said, what's he talking about? I don't know what this means. And my partner is a former commercial banker. So he's like, okay, it's like hiring a realtor. An M&A banker is like a realtor, but for your business.
That's right.
He broke it down for me in really simple terms without any judgment that I didn't know. And so he said, you have the most to gain and the most to lose out of this. So you need to run this. He said, I need to focus on sales and make sure our ARR is growing and solid. You should focus on this. I said, great, that's what I'll do. And it was great timing because we were in the process we had formed a leadership team for the first time ever. And I was in the process of pushing a lot of my responsibilities down to these leaders. And so I actually had more time than I had ever had since I started running the business. And so I interviewed bankers, selected a banker, and it was off to the races. And it was about 4 months from hire to wire, as they say.
Yeah. And I actually think that some of that, it's timing that in that weird window within 2021, like the acquisition, the M&A market was nuts. And then it sort of slowed to a normal range. Like for me too, it was also 4 months. I sold in 21, 4 months, start to finish. And I think now what I see is it's taking a little bit longer. But so when you ran the process, and I know I've heard you talk about how important it is to select the right partner to run that type of process, because these guys like have it down to a science and really understand what they need to do to make you marketable and fight the good fight and do all of that. Did you look at multiple companies to go to? Did you know instantly that this was the right company? How did that process work for you in terms of having offers from acquirers?
Well, we were looking at about 5 companies and all by referral.
Yeah.
I think that's so important.
Me too.
To have a network of other entrepreneurs who you can go to and say, look, this is what we're thinking of doing. Who would you recommend? And we also, I think we were referred to a law firm that supports companies like ours through the process. And so we were referred to the law firm first. And we interviewed them, and they said that they would do, they recommended that we do like this full-scale document review of all of our business documents to make sure that we had everything in place.
Right.
You don't want to go into start your relationship with your banker and look like you're a disaster and you don't have your stuff together. So they agreed to do this document review first for free, with the understanding that if you do a transaction, you're going to use them as your law firm. And so we asked them for recommendations for bankers because I thought, this is great. They know who's a disaster and who's good to work with, and they'll recommend some good people. So between personal recommendations and that, we maybe had like 5 that we were looking at. 2 declined to work with us because either they thought it wasn't a good fit from kind of the type and size of business, or they were too busy. Like you said, it was really crazy. And we were determined to start the process in 21 because we just knew something was coming.
Well, you knew timing. You are someone who I would say did accurately time the market. And it sounds like it was somewhat intentional. Like, I never say that anyone can time the market, but I do think that you knew that tech had a limited runway of this level of burgeoning craziness and that the time would be now. And so that's really kudos to you on that. It's fascinating.
And not only that, but there were rumblings about Russia for a very long time.
Yes.
I remember having dinner with our tech firm, the owners of our tech agency.
Yeah.
And our team was in Russia.
Yes.
And I remember talking to them about it. Everything from like the SWIFT payment system, like they said, if that gets frozen, that's going to be an issue. And so we were talking about that earlier in 21. And so that was another concern. And look what happened. We sold in January of 22, and by end of February, there's a war, and our team actually, I heard that our team members had to flee to Istanbul. So that's, that's something that could have been solved, but would have been very disruptive and worrisome.
For sure. So I think you really just tapped into your and your partner's intuition that this was just the time. And when you signed with the investment bankers and you go and you run this process, how did you end up ultimately selecting the acquirer? Did you choose based on money or fit or all of it? I know you talk a little bit about this on your TikTok.
Yeah, we would have always preferred a strategic deal. There are financial deals where it's usually PE firms buy 80% of you and then they give you more money to keep running it, or they bring someone in. Those I was very suspicious about, given my history with what happened when I sold more than 50% of my company.
Yep.
And they tend to be, there's more kind of value or more money is attached to future performance, which means you're not guaranteed to get that, or they stock, and messier and less clear about what your exit's going to look like. So we always favored a strategic deal, even though we knew the overall valuation is typically lower. And that's what we got. And I also was very mindful of finding a good home for our team. And at the time, I didn't know that I wouldn't be part of the team moving forward. You just don't know. But I was concerned about our team. And one of my criteria was, could we find a buyer that would actually expand opportunities for our team with a more global business, more brands under their umbrella, and also more opportunities to grow and be promoted within the company. We had limited opportunities, and there were some things we did and got really creative that provided opportunities for folks who were very ambitious, and we knew we would probably lose if we didn't provide those opportunities. Things like hybrid roles, for example. That's what I was thinking about when I was evaluating offers. And Euromoney, which now the company has been, I can't even keep track of all of the different iterations they've done, but I think they're called Altrata now. And that's an umbrella brand for 5 acquisitions that they made in the people intelligence business. So that's what they call it. They acquired 2 companies that are, databases for nonprofits to use for potential donors. So rich people data. And then there are 3 companies that focused on executive decision maker data. And of course, there's some overlap in those 2 things. And so they've just wrapped up this nice people intelligence business. A lot of our team members are still there 2 years later. I mean, actually, most of them who were there when we sold are still there. And I hear things are going really well.